Hello class, today I will be teaching you about the various forms of government that exist throughout the world. And to start, here are the objectives for today's lesson. The first one is that you will be able to explain the different types of government that exist. And the second is that you will be able to explain the relationship between political ideology and government. So to begin, a political ideology is really the philosophy by which people decide to create a form of government. Examples at the bottom include capitalism, communism, fascism, socialism, conservatism, nationalism, and anarchism. So it is the philosophy and the values of a country that determines how the government is ran and structured and created. So a government itself is the governing body of a nation and that runs the whole country. So depending on how it's structured, which there are various different ways, you could have a large group of people running the country or just a single individual in charge of the whole country. And the relationship that political ideology and government have, again, one of our objectives, is that the ideology of the country determines how the government is structured. So, for example, if an ideology believes that multiple people should have a say in how the country is ran, then they will structure the government in a format that allows multiple people to control and make changes to it. This will include allowing multiple people to create the laws and impact the decisions of the country versus just a single individual controlling all of that. So to really simply wrap up what the relationship is, the ideology explains how society should work, while the government is the structure by which the country runs and is how it works. So just because someone has a specific political ideology, that does not mean that the government will function in a way that matches that ideology, but typically the ideology of the country impacts how the government is structured and ran. Different types of government. The first one we will discuss is a monarchy. And the way a monarchy works is that a monarchy is where a king or queen controls the country and the line of succession is hereditary. So, for example, if a king or queen were to die, then their children would take over and run in their place versus having the people vote on the next leader. An example of this is jolly good old England, where you can see their flag and a king on the bottom, because they do have a queen currently as their monarch. And you can think back to the medieval times where the king and queen really was the country and ran every aspect. Now then, this ties into the two different types of monarchy. The first is the absolute monarchy, which, as I just mentioned, is where a king or queen, so the monarch, controls all aspects of the government. They could pass any law they wanted to at the snap of a finger or execute anyone they wanted just because. However, there are also constitutional monarchies, which are more popular today, in which, while the monarch is the head of the executive branch, much like our president, there is also an elected body, like a senate or parliament, that controls legislation. So the people of the country elect representatives on their behalf to pass new laws, while the monarch would just be in charge of enforcing those laws. Very different from an absolute monarchy in which the monarch controls both the legislation and the executive, where they can make new laws and enforce them however they want. Now then, the government is a dictatorship, and a dictatorship, it's very similar to an absolute monarchy, only the difference is, while an absolute monarchy, the line of succession is hereditary, in a dictatorship, once the dictator of the country dies or retires, the person that replaces them does not have to be related to them by blood. It could be a friend or really anyone else that they want to take their place. So in a monarchy, the children will typically replace their parents, while in a dictatorship, the dictator can appoint anyone they want to replace them afterwards. But like an absolute monarchy, the dictator has all the power to control every aspect of the government. Now, a democracy is very different from a dictatorship. So in a democracy, everyone plays a role in voting on all matters about the country. So while most people think that our country, the US, is a democracy, which it kind of is, it's not a true democracy. An example of a true democracy would be Athens, because in Athens, every eligible voter would go and vote on every single issue. This includes whether the country at war, if a new bill would be passed, if new laws would be enforced. While in our country, as you can probably tell, we don't have everyone vote on every single issue. For example, if the U.S. were to go to war, we wouldn't have every person, all 300 million individuals in the country, vote on it. Instead, what the U.S. has is a republic. Now, a republic is a form of democracy, but the way it works is everyone, for example, everyone in the U.S., votes on representatives to vote on the matters of legislation or whether or not the country goes to war for them. So, in a democracy, while everyone would go and vote on an issue, in a republic, you'd only have a select few. So, for example, in the state of Minnesota, we elect 2 senators to the Senate. Now, while everyone in Minnesota gets to vote for the senators, it's only these senators that we elect that gets to decide about whether the U.S. will go to war or if a new law will be passed. Now, the next form of government is an oligarchy, which is when a small group of people have control of a country. This is not the same as a republic where we elect representatives on our behalves, but instead an oligarchy, while still controlled by a small group of people, they are not per se elected to that. It's really when the elite just take all the power and don't share it. An example of this would be the Russian Federation, where all of the rich and powerful individuals make all the decisions for the country without consulting or being elected by the masses. While Russia does have a prime minister or president, it's more just for show, and in fact the oligarchy has been the same group of people controlling the country for the past decades without really consulting the people of the country. Now then, the last group, or the last type of government that we will be discussing, theocracy. And the way a theocracy is set up is that the government is ruled by priests or religious leaders that rule in the name of their god or gods. An example of this is the Vatican City, in which the Catholic Church controls the country. Their head of state is the Pope, who is a religious figure, and they pass laws and decide what to do about issues based on their religious beliefs, as opposed to our country, the U.S., which doesn't act solely based on religion, but also the desires and what's best for the country based on what the overall populace believes. So really, the big takeaway about a theocracy is the religious group controls the government in every aspect of it. Now then, the last thing that we discuss is the Constitution. Now, constitutions, they really apply to all countries, whether they're a republic like the U.S. or a monarch like Saudi Arabia or England. The way that what a constitution is the body of laws that structure the government and its powers. So, for example, in the U.S., we have a constitution that states very clearly the different components of government, like the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. It very clearly outlines them and the powers of the government, and additionally how to change the Constitution. So all of these various types of governments that we have discussed have forms of constitutions that, depending on the way they're structured, will have allow the government to have various different powers. So again, the big takeaway that I want you to have from this are the various types of governments that we've discussed, and what exactly a political ideology is and how it impacts the government. Thank you very much, and we will discuss this material further in class. See you tomorrow.